Hello and welcome to Power Reflections, a proud member of the Duff Network where we reflect on Wildbow's most Christmassy work as it releases. I'm Ruben Morehouse.
And I'm Elliot Diebold.
And we're here with a guest because that's how we do it. Welcome, Lexi. Welcome to the show.
Hey.
Back to the show, I guess.
Back to the show, yes. Is this my third time or just second time? I don't remember.
I think second.
Okay. It's been a while regardless.
Yeah. I don't think we've seen you since arc 4 or 5 it was.
Oh my gosh. Oh gosh. Wow. A million years ago.
Yeah.
But it was like 4 normal book series ago.
Back when the Blue Heron was the shiny new thing.
Yes.
How would you compare the story in arc 4 and the story in arc 19, like?
Well, you know what? Like, I feel like after a certain point, it's sort of after the Blue Heron, it sort of settled into like this certain scope and sort of rhythm that in the beginning it was kind of ramping up to. So I feel like that was part of the ramp up, part of the although it was sort of the side detour too, so I'm not really sure. But then since then we've kind of been at this high stakes area where it just keeps on rolling.
Yeah.
So I can see that.
It definitely does sort of feel like the story just hasn't let the Kenneteers get off the wild ride for quite a while.
Well, they have though. I mean, the summer ended, and then they just things have been more paced out, which I think is really nice. A nice little change from Wildbow's usual, at least as usual as of this book, where nearly every single day gets covered, right?
But we do have those regular sort of 1 to 2 month gaps where it sounds like things are relatively calm. But there's still always shit hanging over them during those.
Yes. Constantly.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting because in the very short amount of time that they were practitioners during the summer, we saw them change so much. And then of course with these little time skips, a similar or greater amount of time is passing, but we're not seeing all of those changes. But at the same time, real life is sometimes like that too. We have these periods of intense change and challenge, and then we kind of coast for a while sometimes, improving, of course, but
I would characterize it slightly differently as when they went to the BHI, that they really started. They changed directions a few times, I guess, trying to figure out where they stood. And in recent time skips, they've just they've known what they're doing, and they've been doing it for the past 10 arcs, just getting better and better at it, I guess.
Yeah. I think with Verona getting her domain, I think she's really settling into a sense of self, which is a thing I really want to talk about. But should we just jump into the arc summary? Sorry, I don't mean to fence post your own podcast. I just want to get to that part.
Fine, good hosting instinct. Let's summarize the arcs because it has been a long one. Is this the longest arc ever? The
ever
that I had was I was comparing it to Summer Break, and we did I think the same amount of episodes on this arc as we did on Summer Break. So
but I'm pretty sure arc 17 was still longer in terms of word count, number of chapters, and number of episodes.
Gosh,
people sleep on arc 17 and how sleeping it was.
Anyway, this arc starts. Verona is just kind of partying with all her different, I don't know what we call them, her clique, I guess.
Her girl gang.
Her girl gang, yeah.
Yeah, her girl gang.
But
which I love so very much.
She's got a gang, yes. She's chatting to Macaulay about how she's going to have to kill somebody, and then just kind of goes around doing some miscellaneous business around town before having a nightmare meeting with the gang. But Charles has learned to listen in, unfortunately.
Yeah, and then we jump to 19.2, which is Lucy's perspective as she joins Verona, Bracken, and Oakham for some winter training with Guillerme. This is the one where they learn how to pretend coldness away. And after a bit, Guillerme sort of kicks the casuals out, and he's just teaching Lucy and Verona about winter glamour's special powers and how sort of permanent it is. And in the meantime, we're getting flashbacks where Lucy is also learning about visceral glamour from Toadie and how impermanent and how it's all about just throwing spaghetti at the wall, basically. You just do 10 glamours and hope one of them does the trick. Anyway, in between these flashbacks, Guillermo and Toadie are sort of both prompting Lucy to think about what she wants to do with her life. And just as she starts to confront that question, Father Grobar shows up and provides a handy distraction.
Mm-hmm. In 19.3, Avery runs the left field, and her kindness to the giant, terrifying Scarecrow Keeper grants her a dozen fireflies that are going to be her pals for the future, rescued from eventual harvesting by Wondercand. Then she and Papa Kelly visit the Anishinaabe Council to make a connection. Then they swerve through the Dropped Calls domain and turn Papa Kelly into a bad rendition of a tearaway dragon, ending with walking into a meeting with Clementine, the Gilded Lily, and Semeniego, the Witch Hunter.
I forgot about Connor the Dragon.
Yes.
That was good.
Wow, a little bit.
The Fireflies introduced only this arc, but have already become such a pivotal part of Avery's whole vibe, which is great.
Yes.
So 1904, Lucy and the Dog Tags are hunting down Father Gobar. Wallace is her guy in the chair. They take down Father Gobar, and Lucy goes to Wallace to thank him, but then his mum is being a piece of shit. She and Wallace kind of connect, and he hints her towards the St. Victor's kids.
But then we cut away to Avery again because she's having a chat with her new best friend, Semeniego. It's basically the duo competing to influence Clem, where Semeniego wants to turn her into a, murderous, awful person, and Avery not that. Avery is eventually sort of able to secure a deal that works for everyone, much to Semeniego's disappointment. He just kind of spends most of it whining and being sad. And while this is going on, we get some flashbacks where basically we meet the new team MVP, Putnam, as she helps Avery stick it to Janine at a party. And then Avery sort of reflects on both of these encounters and just like the wolves in her life and how she's going to handle the wolf.
Mm-hmm. In 19.6, Verona has a great or terrible idea on connecting the market to Kennet above via a nightmare festival. She tells her mom about her ADHD coping mechanisms and how she's actually doing really well at school for the first time since ever. The market night gets pulled together, Elpie has a ball, and the Negateers abandon a corpse in the school.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What happens? So Verona has an argument with her dad, but he backs down for once, and it's weird, and we're unsettled, and Verona is unsettled, and she chats to Jasmine, who puts her foot in her mouth a bit, but is basically awesome as usual. Verona fails to make a sale at the night market, but she and Lucy do end up catching some of the St. Victor's kids, and they start to kind of tug at that mystery a bit. But of course, they can't just have three things, getting at them all at once. There has to be a fourth thing, and so in come the Winter Fae.
Yeah, 19.8 picks up exactly where that one leaves off. We jump to Lucy's perspective as they start sort of interrogating, I think it's Harry, the Negateer that they've captured. She and Verona are kind of playing good cop, better cop before Lucy pulls a sneaky and manages to break into the bathroom and overhear the rest of the Negateers conspiring. She listens in as they call in our favorite lord, the dropped call, and he relays a message from Charles that the Kennet practitioners need to back the fuck off. Stalled a bit, Lucy goes back to Guillermo for some more training, and after a quick chat with her mom and a nice dream of a life with John, decides that she, wants to be a doer and starts reading up on karmic law stuff. Lawyering things, business.
Lawyering things business. That was my major, actually. I switched. In 19.9, Avery and Nora shop for gifts, and it's very cute, and I love them. Then Avery and Snow enter Fairyland with a Y and make some teeny tiny connections before Avery comes home to a Sheridan and Mama Kelly meltdown. She builds one more market connection with the Marisica blown up ghost town and gets an offer from Gilkey to learn Marisica's secret transformation sequence.
Yeah, the triumphant return of Gilkey, thank God. Can't wait to see them more.
Triumphant is a word for that, yes.
Triumphant in the sense that Gilkey has returned, I guess. 1910, Lucy is prepping for an exam and Mia is badgering her, and she's annoyed at it, but it gets worse because a Fae attacks her during her exam and forces a fight. Lucy does really well. She is only almost killed. But, during this fight kind of starts to put together how unwinnable their predicament with the Winter Fate is. There's no way that they're going to argue their way out of their perceived crimes.
But then 1911 opens up with somebody pitching a really good plan to take down the Wild Hunt as Taddy tries to convince Verona that they can take him. Unfortunately, Verona shuts her down, and anyway, they all head to Verona's domain where she finds Lucy, who is like in a very understandable funk right now. Verona helps talk Taddy down from getting herself killed, and also, helps talk Lucy out of her funk a bit. And I guess because things were going well, the Wild Hunt, their ears were burning, so they showed up and they caused Verona to gainsay herself because it turns out there was something, and we thought it was a fairy of one kind, but it wasn't. Because that's the same trick they'll pull on us a billion times, apparently. And Verona's response to this setback is to bring her fetch back to life and then just go hang out with Charles, because that's a sane reaction to these sequence of events.
Speaking of, in 1912, Verona arrives in Carmine Kennet and spends some time unfriendly shooting the shit with our old pal, Charles the dog killer. She asks if he's okay. He is. They collab on a cool anti-Musser, skinny, gender-neutral-ish incarnation of parody. Verona gets a sexy dream with Avery's dreamy cousin for a minute before asking Edith for a meeting.
I just got to say, first of all, I continue to love this idea that Verona got Charles to admit he wasn't a pervert and then immediately weaponized that against him.
Yeah.
But also, like, the idea that Verona is the one reaching out to Edith for a meeting is just so juicy, because Edith is, the closest thing to Brett in this story. Like, that's the idea that Verona is willing to give Edith any room to try and redeem herself or something is fascinating.
Yeah, I love the idea that we get this like parody monster introduced, and then that kind of becomes the way that that we have the Musser showdown later. It's just kind of like the concept of being forced to, live a mile in your opponent's shoes as a measure of judgment is introduced and then reintroduced later in this arc. I think it's great. It's really cool.
Yeah, good point.
I loved all the Charles Verona just talk. I kind of really like Charles at this point. I don't know how common of a feeling that is, but it's a conversation that definitely endeared me a little bit more.
Yeah. Avery is chatting to the Garricks in 19.13 and finds out that they have a rat in their midst. Kelsey is there and also kind of starts to demonstrate that she's very helpful to Avery in the right circumstances, negotiations specifically. Avery wants to help the Garricks but can't help enough, and so there's a bit of tension there, but she ends the chapter deciding to go and pick up some of Musser's scraps.
And so once again, 1914 is that. It's the second Avery chapter. I think this is the first of our bits where we got 2 chapters from each Kenneteer. So this is part 2 of Avery's. She and Kelsey run Bound to the Party together. So, they rock some cool outfits, just, dress up, have a good time, mum and daughter day sort of vibes. And it all works. They end up at the Musser residence. Raquel has gotten engaged, which is very exciting for her. And so she obviously acts out on this by signing Avery's contract without even reading it, which, all things considered, is still wildly just trusting of Avery. But yeah, Avery and Kelsey managed to get away with the signed contract by Raquel. And I guess, sorry, just quickly speaking of Raquel, she was I think I remember all the other women in the room kind of had a go at Raquel because she was like, "Oh, please tell me this contract can stop my uncle." And Avery was like, "I don't know if it can, but we're gonna try." I really hope we get to see Raquel again soon, because I want to see her response to the fact that her uncle's just absolutely got his ass handed to him at the end of this arc.
Yeah. I just want to check in with the Musser contingent in general, really.
True.
In 19.15, Lucy learned some law from our lawyer boy, Sebastian Harless, before getting SWAT teamed by the Winter Court for being too boring. Guillermo intervenes but disappoints, and Lucy is just not having a good time. But Verona and some others try to cheer up a bit. Then she and the dogs visit a cat house and talk to some interesting kitties to involve them in Kennet and the market, before finishing off with inviting a normal guy to sell normal clothes in a not normal Kennet below.
Yeah, the Kenneteers are waiting for Musser to arrive at their council meeting, and when he does, he's got Durocher in tow. They begin to quabble over Musser's legitimacy as a leader, over whether people support him, over whether he's assisted Charles or gone against him, and it's pretty clear that Musser's arguments are all bullshit. But the Kenneteers have built enough support for this market and all their kind of connections with it that Musser can't just override it. So he decides instead he's going to burn it down and rule over the ashes. The Kenneteers are understandably a little pissed off at this shenaniganry and decide to challenge Musser once and for all.
Yes, and so that leads us into 1917. This is one of those .everyone chapters. Basically, the Kenneteers have challenged Musser to all that he is, and because Charles is running the test, that means they have to put all of themselves on the line too. So they get some backup from like the rest of Kennet and their parents, and enter this contest where they have to prove that they would do better alone than AJ does. Which they don't, because like the whole point of this book is that that's stupid. So like Avery doesn't do great. Verona does well for a bit until she gets throoped. Lucy does all right, but ultimately she and her family can't hold up. So Musser does the best, and it looks like he's about to win, but Durocher finally pulls her head somewhat out of her own ass and delivers the sweetest justice of all time as she pulls her support from him, and we finally seemingly see the end of Musser, and it's glorious, and it's a victory that really holds up because the Wild Hunt shows up pretty much immediately following.
Mm-hmm. And then final chapter, our interlude, 19.Z. Ryan, cheat of fate and fortune, has a terrible, no good, very bad day. He's hounded by an incarnation of fortune and a post-betrayal and transition into disaster incarnate ex-pal, among others, for being a slightly transphobic cheating hole in reality. Ryan takes his city spirit, Sovereign the Centipede, and escapes the system by becoming a part of it. We flash forward to the almost present to him as the Aurum Coil, reflecting on the ironies of judgeship with his peers. He and the other judges reveal that they're totally down with Charles's big plan to fuck the system, which includes being fair to kids when you hand them superpowers and responsibility. Finally, we catch up with the Kenneteers and witness their final life or death argument of the arc, talking the Winter Court into chilling the fuck out. They pledge to be good guardians and representatives of Winter, and the Winter Court agrees to leave in exchange for information on Marsica. Charles gives them till the new year before they'll be officially at war.
Oh, good times ahead.
Yeah, gonna be fun pile of shit that they're
fun pile of shit.
Yeah.
It's interesting where we're going.
You can say a lot of negative things about Charles, but at least he respects a good old-fashioned Christmas armistice.
Mm-hmm.
That's nice of him to let them have Christmas before he turns all of his Carmine might against them.
Kind of genuinely, it is a little bit. I mean, I don't know how ready he is, I guess, on his side, but I imagine that like he could fuck them up right now at their lowest point if he wanted to. After all of this.
But I mean, to be fair, something that Charles has been pretty consistent about throughout this story is like he doesn't really have ill will towards like he's
Mm-hmm.
he's not a he's a little bit of a monster, but like in his view, he's not a monster. Like he doesn't want to hurt these kids. He just needs to stop them. I mean, he's sworn oaths. Like he's doing this because he genuinely likes the Kenneteers. I still maintain that bit where he made the other with Verona was probably the most fun he's had in a decade. Like,
yeah, I mean that's his shit, summoning others, right? So
yeah, and like I think Verona, I'd rather work with Verona than like Edith or Marisica. So like, in terms of like teamwork, I think it was probably the best he's had. It's like I think he's going into combat against the Kenneteers quite unwillingly. Like I genuinely believe he doesn't want this, but he'll do it. Like the thing we've learned about Charles is he'll cross that line if he has to.
Mm-hmm. What do you guys take of what the conflict fully is between the Kenneteers and Charles and how it can resolve. Like, I mean, they're trying to kill him, and I believe, as a bold and specific prediction, that they're probably going to, just because they've been planning it for so long, and he has to be unseated somehow. But I mean, I feel like a lot of his goals are kind of in alignment with them, and now that like all the other big bads that we've had, I mean, one was introduced this arc, the Winter Court, before getting handled, and then Musser's finally pretty much done. Charles is the only big bad left, and I feel like it's mostly just his means to get to power that was the really bad part, and that at this point, like, I don't know, I feel like a compromise is possible.
Yeah, I obviously it's been, I want to say, 2 weeks since Megafire dropped that big essay on like their thoughts on all the judgeship overhauls and all that. And I guess just with something like that in mind, like if we are at the point where Verona is really talking about trying to replace the judges as an entire institution, I'd love it if they didn't kill Charles, because I feel like Charles is one of those villains where I'm like, no, you don't get to die. You have to sit there and live through all of your shit failing and watch like the good guys succeed. I want him sitting in a prison somewhere having to watch nice things happen for everyone else.
I don't know though, because I feel like he'd be fine with nice things happening to everyone else. Like,
yeah, that's where the prison comes in. I want him to be locked up while he's doing it.
So while everyone like gets to have a field day outside, he's like in detention. That's the sort of vibe. Okay, I see.
Freedom for everyone but Charles specifically.
Okay, all right. I don't know if I fully agree with that, but because I feel like at the end there, the sort of message I got from Charles sort of outlining his plan was kind of like, I'm going to change the system one way or another. And if I like die in the process and it's not what I wanted it to be, at least there was change. So if he does lose and the good guys win, like, and we don't return back to the seal, then I think he would be happy with that outcome.
Yeah. I mean, the only thing stopping him from actually being on like Miss's side and being with Kennet from the start was like the anger and resentment he's been holding on to from his forswearance. Like the only reason he wasn't on board with like what Miss is doing is because he thinks it's ultimately too slow and ineffective. So you're right that like if it ends up being they beat him because they get their change instead, there's a lot of room for him to still be okay with the fact that something like that happened. I don't know. Maybe that's the part of the moral compromise of the victory. Like if this story ended with Kennet getting what they want, but to an outsider, it looks like a huge part of why they were able to do that was because of what Charles did. Like maybe that's the compromise for Kennet is everyone thinking that Charles had a really big part in their victory.
Yeah. What do you think, Ruben?
Yeah, I think Charles is a chiller. That's my overall.
Charles is chiller. Yeah, now that he's not suffering every single day, a fuck ton. Yeah, he get when Rona asks if he's okay, he says he is. I don't know. I guess he has to be, otherwise he'd fucking forswear him, right? But again,
I think his plan is to burn bright and burn out quick, right? And like so far, everything's going according to plan for old Chucky. The Kenneteers taking him out is probably a part of that plan that he, if not welcomes, at least somewhat kind of expects.
No, I think we're seeing evidence that he's not thinking like that so much anymore. Like his chat with Ryan in 19.z, he's starting to be like, he's starting to make plans, assuming he's going to stick around. Now that Musser's gone, I think he's genuinely sort of like, oh, I think I'm actually going to get to do this. Like, which is interesting because that's going to give him, I think he has mentally moved on from being in that state where he's like, well, if I go out with a bang. Like, it's sort of like before he had nothing to lose. Now he's got something to lose, and that might change how he works, basically. He's gone from someone who's willing to die to someone who's like, his plan is actually in motion, and he wants to keep his hand on the wheel, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, it's a pretty common theme with something like this of like when you do take power and are able to have your revolution, like, are you able to step down afterwards and let other people take over? Are you able to let other people change your vision, or do you hold on to control and in the doing kind of taint your own success? I think like Miss is a great example of like, yeah, she
Yeah.
compromised and was like, I can't have what I want, and that sucks, but I'll settle for something else that I still have a pretty huge hand in forming, but still, there was a sacrifice there.
Yeah, well, and this was the old Bristow test, right? That was the thing. The
Hmm.
Kenneteers are like, we'll join Bristow's thing if he's willing to not be the one in charge of it.
Right.
Like the yeah, you're right. That's been something that's been sort of quite recurrent in this story.
Hmm. I have a whole different set of things I want to talk about other than the community and um big bad stuff. But if there's anything else you guys wanted to say about that, um, say it.
um, I guess I just wanted to reiterate something that I wasn't happy with how I phrased it in our episode on it, which was the moment where Derosha defeated Musser.
Hmm.
Just what I loved about that moment was like Charles and the other judges, I suppose, sort of made this test against Musser, like have this stupid like libertarian slant of like, if it was just you against the world, like how would you do? A- And that's obviously still going to be biased towards the rich white guy,
Right.
um, like because it was still them in their original like households and stuff to a degree.
Hmm.
And it was so like it's just it was such a great look into how Charles views all this stuff because that this idea of the test being how do you do by yourself against the world, that's such an undercity kind of mentality that
Hmm.
this thing that Charles has helped create, and it's completely ignoring like what Pale has been all about, which is that sense of community and how they're making each other stronger. And so yeah, Musser wins this stupid test that Charles and Co designed, but it still doesn't work because Musser is still winning because he sort of by default has a better community until Derosha realizes what a monster he is, and then like it's like Derosha who ends up proving the Kenneteers right because she becomes a good community member and strips it away from him, and it's just so nice to see that like despite Charles's best efforts to turn this into some individual nonsense of pulling yourself up by your bootstraps, it ultimately still came down to what Kennet's all about, which is Musser lost the support of his people by being a piece of shit.
Hmm. Yeah, he burned through a lot of goodwill, and kind of did make everything worse for Dershay's. Like, I don't know. I mean, I guess she was pretty happy about it, actually. The whole
Yeah.
more monsters to tame, but still. Um,
Yeah,
yeah.
but it's just like because the thing with the whole premise of the test of it's just going to be you on your own is inherently stupid because like if
Mm.
AJ's childhood looked even a shred like his actual one, he's still going to naturally have his name, his contacts in the community. Like I feel like even if you exile him from the Musser family or whatever, he's still somebody who was going to be better connected and just yeah like a straight rich white dude. Like he was always going to more naturally get people on his side, and so it was like just such a garbage challenge because it still wasn't his individual strength. It was the fact that he more aligned, like he just does better in a patriarchal society naturally.
Hmm.
And so yeah, it was a stupid test, and Derosha helped them win it. That's just so glorious.
Yeah, it's interesting though because I mean he did have his like fucked up a childhood thing, and it's just when he started devouring the best traits of his peers that he was able to pull through, right, and not get murdered by his own father. Um, which is like really fucked up, and now he's just as fucked up as his dad. Um, but it's interesting because it seems like that aspect of him, the aspect of him that did successfully eat the best traits of his peers, that is part of that like true self that was tested, even though those traits might not have been like actually his, which is, I don't know, it's interesting. um Especially because like it's not like there's a very clear line between what our true individual self is, um
Yeah. Yeah.
without the influences around us, because obviously we'd be different people, right? So it's like go back, and then the version of myself all of those years ago, starting there, what would have changed, rather than like the person that I am now after all this growth test me, you know? um I
Exactly.
just found it an interesting frame for that test.
Well, it's such a fundamentally flawed idea for a test to me because, yeah, I mean, no matter how you slice it, I'm going to be able to argue something's not fair until you essentially get to the point where we're testing like spheres in a vacuum, right? Like it's
Mhm.
like you're stripping out so many parts of context and individual aspects of self that you reach the point where the test has lost any meaning anyway.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So at a
It,
certain point, the test has to be biased in some way. Like you're still sticking Verona back with her dad, or like you're still doing something. So it's a stupid way of trying to like measure things like this. Like, how do you do as an individual? Like, there's no such thing, and like that's what Pale is about. And it's the way Durosha turned it around was kind of the proof of that. It was like even when Musser won on his own, it was because of people like her, and she was able to say, "No, I don't want to. Like, I take it back."
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I find that interesting. Ruben, what's your take?
yeah, I think I don't know. I kind of flip flop between thinking that the test is unfair, but also thinking like it's impossible to make it fair. So what can you do? You know?
Don't do
Mhm.
these stupid tests.
Yeah,
Well,
but
It's
well,
dumb.
how else? How else
yeah,
would you? Well, what other way would you challenge Musser then?
I
You
mean,
can think
I don't
about
know.
it. You don't have to have an answer right
Yeah.
off the top of your head.
I don't know. I think there's a way to just kind of evaluate like the actual history. I don't know whether we need these hypotheticals that tap into doors you've already opened or whatever. Like I don't know. I'd just be like, can't we just use the facts like they would in a real court? Except here we have actual augury or whatever the fuck.
Hmm.
Plus,
Yeah.
the inability to do perjury.
Hmm. I mean, it was kind of a play specifically to get him to like it was a play attacking him, right? Um, to test him and it's everything that he is, right? Just to make sure that he can't take the town, rather than a defensive one that's like on everyone's terms, right? Like it was specifically made to target him, right?
Yeah. I guess yeah, I mean I guess the point was that they were challenging whether he was actually a leader, and I guess I would argue that the hypothetical simulations weren't addressing the core of that argument in a satisfactory way to me.
Hmm.
Like,
I mean, he was going to
yeah.
rule over the ashes, so that is a pretty not great leader thing to do to the people living in the ash heap, at least.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But this is the other verse. The bullshit precedent will be that doesn't matter for some stupid reason.
Yeah.
Like that's the problem.
Yeah. I mean, I can imagine reasons why in a different scenario you would argue that, like needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few, that sort of thing. But even still, especially because it is about Kennet in particular, that
Yeah.
this argument is about. But yes. Um, I'd like to talk about the thing that I fixated on during this arc. If that's cool.
Hell yeah. That's what we're here for.
Yeah, so I don't know if y'all knew this, but I've not been doing great for the past while. Hence, but like I had to take a step away from doing my podcasts. Um, and I've been like moving a bunch, and yeah, just have a lot going on. Um,
Sorry to hear that. Yeah.
no, yeah, it's fine. I just for context, like there was just a lot of sections in this past arc, particularly at the beginning, that were really affecting for me and really, I don't know, gave me some guidance and stuff, and were meaningful. As well, I know it's in arc 18, but there's also the scene with Seth and Charles at the end there that
Hmm.
that one was very, very affecting. So I screenshotted a bunch of them, and then I eventually went and found them. So I kind of want to go through at least some of them. Um, so uh, yeah, okay, I'll just go through them. So in 19.1, Verona is talking to Mal. Mal says, "You've got a magic house with minimal parental supervision. This could be party central. You could chill out, do what you want, say fuck it, screw everything out there. That's hard. You've got magic. You've done your share for Kennet. You're doing your share for Kennet. You've fought, you've bled, you've kicked ass. Retire. Do cool magic. Sleep in. Do cool magic. Breathe." Verona thought about the nightmare she'd had, herself, grown, still living at home, except she wasn't really living, turning to drugs to escape, because she didn't have magic. "Can't," Verona replied. "Too easy. And I've got goals. I'm going to be a sexy sorceress with a magic bookstore. I want my store to pop up in places and people will track me down to bring me interesting practice stuff to talk about. And Mal basically says, you're still a kid, you're not the sexy sorceress. And Verona says, I'll accept that. It's why it's goals and not, I don't know, nows. And then later in the chapter, talking about her father, she says, he's comfortable being miserable, which sounds like an oxymoron, but being able to say, woe is me, I'm a victim, lets you let yourself off the hook for a lot. And the more you're on the hook for, the easier it is to fall into. And basically just saying to her, not giving yourself that slack is kind of what's necessary to go towards that future that you find really important. So okay, I'm gonna read just a couple more quotes just because it's really relevant to this whole thing that I'm talking about. So in 19.2, Lucy talks to her mentors. Guillermo asks, the enduring questions become this: who are you and what do you want? What are you after? And are you certain you want it? And then Toadswell following, what do you fear? What are you anticipating? If we're going to decide the angles we take for these layers so each can put up its own fight, hold up against what's coming, we have to think forward. And then finally, in 19.8, Lucy's mom talks about just how she faced life, saying all of that, all of life, it feels like drowning and all of it pushes you deeper. It seems like it's all you can do to get up there, get a gulp of air into your lungs, but it's tiring fighting. You make sacrifices. You let things drop. I had to realize it's not just about staying afloat. It's about paying enough attention to see a light on the shore and realize you can't just thrash and get through things day by day. You need to swim for the shore to have something waiting for you there. Yeah, so those are the ones that fit this particular theme, which is basically like you need to pick a goal and work toward it, and just make your life better. And if you don't do that, if you don't like give yourself that, and if you only can never just survive, then you can't really go forward. I found that last part really important, that like this, to get to the shore you have to see something there, right? There has to be something that you're swimming for. That's been really important to me. I'm post-college, right? I graduated last summer. I moved to New York, which is really, really cool, but I've been really uncertain about what my future is going to be. And I think that's been part of why I'm feeling sort of stuck myself. Because I don't know what I'm swimming for, you know?
Oh yeah, I've definitely been there at times as well. Like I agree. I think you're right that this is like such an important aspect of like, you know, where the Kenneteers are, and yeah, in real life is that idea of if you're not working towards something. I mean, it's different for different people, but I tend to be more like the Verona side of things, where if I don't have something specific that I'm working towards or moving forward, I just sink and turn into a brat, which, you know, is obviously something
It's not
Verona and
aspirational.
everyone should not want to do. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. I realized that like I very much organize my view of life in like a series of deadlines, and right now I don't have any deadlines. And so I just like the future doesn't exist because I'm not looking at it, you know? I have like the next week, and then beyond that immediately is fog forever. And I need to just put some lights out there, and I need to pick you know, an ideal self to work toward. I really love the section about Verona, and like she could kick back, she could enjoy the amenities she has right now. I just moved into a new place, so that's like pretty relevant to me too, right? And I have like this great room, and I'm going to decorate and everything, and having that is really important to me. But I need to, yeah, think about being a sexy sorceress in the future. What's the kind of person that I want to be later on? And what do I need to do to get there? And those kind of thoughts have been grounding and sort of doing some practices to, unfortunately, non-magic practices, but some practices to, you know, write those ideas down and focus on them and sort of make them real by talking about them and imagining them. I think is, yeah, really, really important. And this helped me realize that.
Yeah, I like that. That's yeah.
For one
So-
more thing, unless if you have something to say, Ruben.
I was just going to say, I mean, obviously, these quotes are all because the Kenneteers are in similar headspaces, right?
Mhm.
I guess, yeah, I'd find it interesting to hear you compare your thoughts around how the Kenneteers are doing at figuring out what they want, what their dream end state looks like with comparisons to whether, I don't know, whether that's been useful for you, I suppose.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think there's a lot in this book that is pretty directly addressable. It's funny. There's actually a lot of things in Wildbow's novels, like especially little things that I've picked up on and then like continually used after that. I don't know how many people read Worm and now squeegee water off of their bodies. Like I know several people that like everyone knows Red Worm anyway that I know in person anyway. That is now something that they do, and they did not do that before. Which is an extremely tiny thing, but I'm talking about these are the influences. You pick up little things from the things you read. And this is just like a series of little things. Each of those quotes were things that I read, and I was like, oh fuck, I should probably do that.
I genuinely have gotten a bit of value out of. I think it was early in this arc. It might have been that phone call you were talking about. There's the part where Verona was talking about her system, where she's like, "I regularly
Mhm.
try to step back and think, is the thing that I'm focusing on right now
I was about to say that, yeah.
actually what I need to be focusing on?"
Mhm.
And I've genuinely tried to be better about doing that in my own life, because I definitely also have that habit of just like quickly going to do something, and then I'm 2 hours in. It's like, oh, I shouldn't have been doing this for 2 hours.
Mhm.
So yeah, like such a silly little small example, but it was just one of those things where I was like, yeah, that's something I probably need to be better about myself.
Mhm. Yeah, there's a couple things about Verona struggles in particular that I've been learning from because I also have ADHD and stuff. And it's a crippling disability. It fucking sucks. Um, and you forget how much it sucks until someone points it out to you. Basically, you're just like, I suck. um, and yeah, that is something though that I am not entirely sure how to balance, and I'm looking forward to the other ways that gets explored in this. But like, how do you keep yourself on the hook? Don't become a brat, but also don't hate yourself, right? Um, which actually leads me into the last thing I wanted to bring up. So this is actually from Arc 18, but it's relevant to this, and it was I think the first thing I screenshotted as of recent anyway. And so Seth has approached Charles, and Charles says, I understand, the Carmine exile whispered, that self-hatred, the frustration, the hopelessness. You hated yourself, hated so many things, and you were trying to find kernels of meaning while you waited for life to happen. When you hate yourself enough, fucking up becomes an addiction. It's a validation of those feelings. It's a relief from the lie, taking everything a fuck up shitheel of a person doesn't deserve and throwing it away. Um, and then what happens is Charles unforswears Seth, but only after Seth asks for it, right? And that's all that needs to be done. And obviously, this is kind of like there's some pretty clear parallels to Christianity here, but I think that's one of the most valuable things from Christianity. This idea of like a what's it called, grace, yeah. And that's basically what Charles is giving Seth here. Because like when you ask for something, you do like admit on some level that you do deserve it, just because you are human. Um, and so, even though it feels like utterly unforgivable to be the person that you are, which is less than you feel like you should be and less than you feel like you need to be, um, so it becomes very hard to forgive yourself because, like, it is unforgivable in the sense of like, it's just the bar maxes out. Um, and so that's why I think it is valuable, and why Christianity and a lot of other religions have this sort of thing. Um, of having some entity that is greater than reality, right? That can just arbitrarily break the rules and be like, yes, this is unforgivable. It is unforswearing is not a thing, but you've asked, and I'm going to arbitrarily grant you forgiveness just because you're human and you deserve that, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's a big deal, and it's sort of, yeah, it's it's been a thing that I've been struggling with actively in the last couple of years, of trying to forgive myself for being myself, right? For, struggling with depression and executive dysfunction, among other things, and just not being the person that I want to be. And it's just like, I don't deserve to hate myself for that, right? I don't think anyone does.
I agree with that.
Yeah.
Yeah. And related, actually, like Seth and Charles both getting to be not forsworn anymore. There was something that I was kind of shaken by a realization after I watched, actually, Midnight Mass is what they helped me realize this, which is a great show, by the way. But I realized that I feel that no human deserves an arbitrarily horrible punishment. I don't believe in free will, but that's like a whole different thing. That we have discussed on the network many times. But and so I kind of don't think it's entirely anyone's fault for how they became the person that chose to become the person that they are today. And therefore, everyone deserves forgiveness no matter what. And if I believe that the worst person in the world deserves forgiveness, then I should probably grant myself that same forgiveness, right? Like that just,
Yeah. Well, and this is the whole thing. This is why forswearing is dumb, because it's a permanent thing. This is the part that Charles is right about, that nobody should ever be forsworn, because it locks you out of ever getting anything back. Like, it's one mistake. Seth sucked, but he didn't deserve suffering for the rest of his life. And, this is the thing about Charles, is he's managed to somehow turn this into a violent war on everything good. But his core idea of everybody should have the opportunity to get better, I guess he just disagrees on what better looks like sometimes. But that core part is something I think we're all 100% behind him on. It's I don't believe in punitive punishment, right? It's the reason you sort of lock people up or whatever is to stop them doing more harm. It's not to you should be helping them. I'm thinking of those nice Nordic sort of prisons, which are actually really rehabilitory rather than just locking people up as a punishment. And I guess you're right. Extending that to the idea of applying it to yourself as well is maybe something Charles could reflect on too, because I think he's far too willing to sell his soul to fix the world. And that's why you end up with somebody who does a lot of bad things.
Yeah, I'm interested in seeing how he views the damages that all his others are causing in that context, but maybe that's a whole different thing.
Yeah, if Charles doesn't die, a chat with Charles post his defeat would be fascinating.
Yeah, I want to investigate them all a bit more too. All the different others that he's made, the big ones anyway. Yeah. I'm thinking of the dropped call. I'm thinking about the dropped call a lot.
Yeah, I mean that is another interesting wrinkle to all this, is even if you defeat Charles right now, there's still the mess he made, right? There's all these lords who are problematic at best, let's say. They're actively working to do things like free the Bjorgmen so he can join their alliances. It's something that's easy to forget is the problem is not just Charles anymore. If you destroy the judges or whatever, whoever picks up afterwards will have to deal with the fact that he's made a hot mess of Ontario right now.
Yeah. Yeah, I found the drop call interesting in particular. Okay, so this is just a little thing that I just want to mention now because I brought it up. But okay, so the dropped call makes all these bodies, right? Fall from the sky, and it's creepy and stuff.
Yep.
But okay, so they're not all people that the dropped call has killed. There's just too many. Okay, unless if you just devoured a town at some point and has just been keeping the bodies around, which means that these are just bodies, which means they're just kind of props. And so I'm just kind of I don't know, if I was if I could talk to the drop call right now, I'd be like, dude, that's kind of lame. Like, these are just like, I know you're trying to be spooky and stuff, but this is just neat. This is like, you just made this. This is good arts and crafts, but like, I don't know. It's more show than reality, I guess. But that's anyway. That's a whole different thing. Bring it on, dropped call.
Fight me IRL.
Yeah, they took away most of the payphones in New York. So, but if I ever see one, gotta watch out.
We've still got them here, but they've turned them all into public Wi-Fi hotspots, which I
No,
think
that's very cool.
Yeah, very cool.
Yeah, no, public things, something for the public. That doesn't sound very American to me. that sounds
without them
like
having
communism.
to pay for it. Come on.
Yeah.
In the socialist utopia of Australia.
Oh my gosh. Okay. Actually, so to transition to a different thing that had just been on my mind, more to the point of like what the different solutions being offered here to fixing the system. I do find Wildbow's answers, at least the answers being explored here, really interesting because they're a little bit different than what I expected. Obviously, community is number one always, but the fact that it's a market is really interesting. That's what's sort of a key part in keeping Kennet alive, right? I guess on one part it is more like the connections between these groups, and trade has always been a way for these connections to grow. I mean, it's not like this isn't capitalism, right? Like this isn't like there's no I think you can have markets without capitalism because capitalism is really focused on the capital and the use of capital and the collection of capital, which is like more what Musser can do, that weight of all of your previous, efforts of past generations and whatever, being able to get more and more on itself. Whereas, with these markets, it's more just like trading like specialties, right? What can you give to the community in exchange for something else?
I definitely have to admit I'm quite a big fan of this market-based system too, because I am admittedly not a full-on socialist, but just more of an advocate for like very heavily regulated, like UBI-based, like capitalist sort of stuff. Like I think there's an inherent want for people to, like, if they put time and effort into stuff, be rewarded for it on an individual level. And so it's just like, okay, but can we have that, but also just not have like poverty and stuff? And I feel like that's the sort of thing that Kennet is moving towards. This idea of like, things are still very heavily based on their market, and there's some people are going to kind of be better off than others, but nobody's having a bad time is sort of the point. And like to me, that feels like, at least based on where the world is now, the sort of thing that we can sensibly aim to try and achieve. Like I think, especially like in our consciousnesses, a lot of capitalist stuff is buried way too deep in our psyches for us to just totally get rid of it all, I think. So it's like just having a version of it that doesn't suck feels like at least, the next stage in how we build society. And I think that feels to me like what Kennet's trying to achieve.
Yeah, speaking of, so that brings me to Kennet found as an answer to what do we do about the system, which I find fascinating because it seems like the answer there is bureaucracy. Bureaucracy will save the world, which I do find very interesting. I find it compelling. I love this tiny little utopia that has been created, which can only be done through magic script for literal social currency, right? For doing good deeds and stuff for the community. It's just really, really interesting. Because like it's very it's communist, but not in the sense of the workers own the means of production, but communist in the sense that it is a community that is like it's organized in that sense of just like the government and the systems built around it to facilitate community more than anything else.
Yeah, I mean, Kennet definitely has the vibe of being a kind of commune refuge from the outside world, right? We'll have to see how much that persists post Musser, but definitely that's been the vibe in this arc.
Yeah. But I do think like what Lexi's saying rings true, because it's like I don't tend to associate the idea of this small little communist commune like Kennet found with just the insane levels of bureaucracy Mrs. instilled in it. Like, like
Hmm.
it's such a funny take on the idea. It's like, yeah, we're gonna absolutely codify the shit out of everything, but those codes are all built around having exceptions and still getting it all in writing. And it's just like, I think I called it a hippie bureaucracy
Hmm.
at one point, and I agree. It's a really fun vibe of like, no, you can still have insane bureaucracy, but it can be good.
Yeah,
Like,
it's like a reverse Kafka-esque sort of thing. I don't know.
yeah. Well, it feels like a direct challenge to like, yeah, like that. Especially, Kennet Below is in many ways Charles's libertarian utopia.
Anarcho-libertarian sort of, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, and like this is Mrs. Challenge to that, where it's sort of like, no, the bureaucracy is not the problem. It's like the flavor of it, and we can do it right.
Yeah, yeah, and then you have the real world, which is just a mess because that's what reality is. It's not these tiny little pockets of idealism. Although, yeah, again, kind of below is not really that great of an ideal, but
Well, it is if you subscribe to that
Mhm.
anarcho libertarian thing. It sort of hits that mark. It's just, I don't know. I'm looking at it thinking, but why would you want that?
I
Like,
think I think most okay. So well, there's so many different flavors of anarchism, even within each like subtype or whatever. Like yeah, anarcho libertarianism is usually I don't know. It's kind of a joke. But even them, I don't think they would look at Kennet below and be like, "Yep, that's exactly what I want." I think it's slightly different, but
that's fair.
um,
I'm admittedly not too well read on any of these things. Like, I don't know. I can't guarantee I've got the definitions of these things exactly right, but like the
that
term,
doesn't stop anyone.
yeah, exactly. Like the thing that I associate Kennet Below with is just the idea of pulling someone up by their bootstraps, or pulling yourself up by your
Hmm.
bootstraps. Like, I see it as a place where it's like, the goal of it is, as long as everyone can technically pull themselves up by their bootstraps, it's succeeding. And it doesn't matter how shit it is for everyone. As
Hmm.
long as there's always a path upward, if you're willing to cross lines, then it's a
And you have a special
success.
talent. I think
Yeah.
it's a big factor, and you know how to use it and stuff. Um,
But
yeah.
yeah, whereas yeah, Mrs. is the opposite. Mrs. is like, hey, what if we just kind of made it so everyone was happy by default, and
Well,
like
it's
radical?
interesting because as a sort of so everyone in Kennet found is utterly unique, right? That's why we fucking love Lost shit. It's fucking awesome because everything is so weird and whimsical and interesting. But at the same time, I don't know. I feel like I don't have a sense for Kennet Found's inhabitants as all providing um a unique thing to their community, each one. I mean, I guess it does happen. There's some that like give milk to others and things like that. But I'm just picturing like I don't know many Kennet Found members, right? Just some that have popped in. Obviously Luna, who's a great little messenger, but I feel like as a difference, all of the characters that we see in Kennet below are like very much this is a part of me that is defining me, and I'm defined by my ability, rather than just by my existence. Um, I don't know. It's just an interesting difference there. Uh, I feel like in the ideal scenario, you kind of have both. You have like everyone's abilities are being used to the best as possible in their community while still validating everyone's existence just for being a person, you know?
Yeah, yeah. Well, I think we talked about this a little bit in our last reflecting episode, but I feel like Kennet, like Kennet as a unit's argument at this point is this idea that you need aspects of all three of these systems. So like you want a little bit of that Kennet below, you want a little bit of Kennet found, and you even do want parts of Kennet above. And it's sort of like the trap tends to be only believing in and advocating entirely for one of them. Like, I do think if Kennet found isolated itself and was entirely just doing Kennet found shit all the time, it would collapse for its own reasons. Like, I feel like what Kennet is advocating for is this idea that there isn't a one size fits all. Some people are going to want to spend time in Kennet below. Some people are going to want to move to Kennet found, and like that can change. And they're essentially advocating for the free flow of people and ideas and stuff between the three. Like, there's strengths and flaws in all three of them, and it's like what you want to do is give people the ability to be fine in any of them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, that is really interesting. I've always thought that like consensually getting to choose what kind of government you're under would be really cool. Yeah, whenever I'm thinking of like little world building utopias or whatever, I'm always like, okay, but if you don't like this one, you can just like leave and go to a different one that you do prefer.
Yeah, I'd argue that's essentially what Kennet has sort of started to become. They're actively encouraging, like we are even seeing people leave Kennet found, and like we saw when Biscuit set up her shop there, there were a bunch of the foundlings who were like, "Oh yeah, give us this crazy biscuit shit. Like we want to get rowdy." And like, if we learn that some of her original customers have even decided to move to Kennet below, like I see that as like, a success. That if that's what vibes with them, they should be able to do it. Like, and the war in Kennet below is really between Charles's extreme view of it and like Kennet's, which is just kind of rounding out the edges and then allowing you to move between it and the other two.
Mm-hmm. It is interesting though where the flaws of those systems do come up, which I think very obviously kind of found being a bureaucracy is that you are more restricted on the things that you can do, right?
Yeah.
Which hasn't come up too many times. In fact, usually those restrictions so far have been good, mostly the like restriction on violence, among other things. But yeah, if you were a member of Kennet below, when just like your very existence kind of challenges Kennet found, then like you're not gonna have that good of a time either, right?
Yeah.
And so I guess that's where the system sort of leaves some people out. But I imagine that we'll have that sort of thing explored as we go forward.
Yeah. 100%.
And yeah, I want to see what Charles's, I don't know, direct like answer to that is, as well as a different thing like Rook. We haven't spoken about Rook, but I think she's really relevant.
What is
to
going
all
on
this.
with Rook?
Yeah, she's been in the background for a while. I think she's definitely going to be on Charles's side.
It does seem that way.
Yeah. Yeah, so it seems like she just wants independence from practitioners, right? That's the main goal, and it's kind of like however that happens, that's fine, right?
Yeah, my mantra for Rook is like she's a classic case of somebody just turning into what they're trying to destroy. Like, I think she's turned to she's so stuck in this sort of violent war mentality that she's not much better than some of the practitioners she's trying so hard to fight against.
Right, she's just fighting for her side. She's just, I guess, it's kind of like a other supremacist sort of vibe, but it's in that sense of like, well, I mean, that is the side of the oppressed, so like.
Oh yeah, you're like absolutely. If you had to pick one, I'm probably going to go with Rook, but also it's like I think we're seeing in this story as she starts to shoot herself in the foot by like there was that time even Guillemot called her out on like making the same mistake that she's made a bunch of times because she's stuck in thinking of the old wars she was in. Like like I guess to talk about what you were saying before. For me, Rook feels like she's just fighting for fighting's sake, and I'd be curious to see what Rook's good future looks like. Like if she wins the war, what does a successful world look like for her? Because I have a feeling that she's so stuck in the war that she doesn't even see a place for herself in the peaceful version. Like she will just go start fighting elsewhere. If Kennet wins, she'll just leave and go fight somewhere else. Is the vibe I have of her.
So I want to reference the thing in Pact, but I think I can do it without spoiling.
We can talk about it in a quick back to Pact at the end if you want.
Sure. Yeah, I think that is most of the things I have. It's mostly just wonderings about how we're going to have these answers to how do we fix the system answered a bit more Because like if you're drawing a parallel to reality, what's kind of happened here, if you were to make an analogy, is basically like a town just like ended up independent, and they got to self-determine, right? Rather than like they didn't specifically themselves fight a war to be independent, but they just ended up that way, right? And then they get to change the system, and then we're hoping that propagates back out. But that's not necessarily something that you can do in this reality unless if you do a Charles and burn it all down first, right? So
Yeah, I mean that's going to be the really interesting thing at the end of this story for me is how much wiggle room people both in and out of the story are going to have to say that without Charles, Kennet wouldn't have succeeded. Um,
yeah.
there's a lot to be said for the mess he made being an avenue to help, which I hate because that sounds like it's saying that what Charles did was worth it or a good thing, and I definitely don't feel that way.
Yeah. And another analogy to reality. So I think I just clicked who Musser is in this version because he's not like the government, right? He's an actor within the system, right? And he's just like one of the winners, one of the most powerful people, and he's deciding to sweep in and change everything according to his image, and that's how things are going to change for the better. Which it sounds to me like he's fucking rich, right? He just sounds like any other like billionaire that's trying to change things. I'm saying that Musk is Elon Musk. I'm just saying they both start with M, last names. So I think that's basically the equivalent I want to make here. I don't know what Elon Musk is planning, but I'm just like, man, the 2000s are going to be interesting in history books in some point in the future. And sometimes I'm just like, look, all of those little drones, you could put little gun on them, right, or make them blow up or whatever. And I'm just saying, Bezos, Musk, they could have like as many of those as they want. So I'm just saying, or something not as violent, but you get my meaning. These powerful people taking more power and maybe changing the world, under their own visions.
I would almost I would put the Koch brothers as maybe other candidates for who like if you had to point someone real as being Musser,
right?
Just because they're much more like old money institutional, whereas a lot of these tech billionaires are kind of the new money. It's like if Ray started being an activist more than like Musser, I see him as so much more old money than someone like Elon Musk. Yeah.
Well, Elon Musk is still somewhat old money. He
that's
came from
true, actually.
Diamond mine, right, or emerald mines, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
There's also that guy. I can't remember his name. He's an Ontario. I don't know what they have their governor or whatever, but like I think his surname was Ford. But he was the one they were running like a UBI trial in Ontario at one point, and then he got into power and like shut it down. And that's the equivalent of trying to take down Kennet. So that's my reasoning for why he's that guy.
Checks out.
Yeah. I might just quickly bring up something else. I've been trying to find the spot to bring up for a while now, but haven't had the chance to zoom out like this. I think I just want to talk about. We've been in a really interesting point for a while now, but especially in this arc with the three Kenneteers and their like personal character journeys. Because I think something that we're really seeing in this second phase of the story is in like post arc 13 is in a lot of ways, a huge chunk of the Kenneteers arcs has flipped around. So it's been about how they can become the people they needed at the start of this story.
Interesting.
Like if arcs 1 through 13 were for generally speaking, the Kenneteers, the idea of them learning to find this community and have that help them overcome the biggest obstacles in their lives. This section has now put more focus on them learning how to do that for other people. So like to focus on Verona as kind of the most obvious example in Arc 19. Her domain has become that place for weirdos to like be able to rest and find their feet. And like her bookshop is now all about connecting people with the weird shit that they can't find for themselves. Like, the Verona at the start of this story didn't really have the space or the knowledge to figure out, that she was not like a normal person, basically. Like, she knew she loved counterculture just because she knew she didn't like culture, but she didn't know who or what she wanted to be.
Right.
And now she's gotten that, and I feel like since she got the domain and stuff, a lot of it for her has been also learning how to do that for other people.
Mm-hmm.
Similarly, like Avery's probably been doing this really since arc 14, but obviously she was really lonely at the start of the story. We just got a reminder of that in 1917,
Mm-hmm.
and now since arc 14, Avery's really been about building these networks that don't let people slip through the cracks like she did. Like, we're seeing her reach out to people like Raquel and the other overlooked practitioner family members, the people who don't get a say, and she's working to give them connections and empower them.
Right. And it gives
She's even
everyone a voice.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Like, she's making sure that she's building networks that don't let people like her slip through the cracks.
Mm-hmm.
And then, like, Lucy's the one who I think is probably the least far on this journey at the moment. But like, we're seeing this with like the way she's having to shepherd the dogs as a kind of inverse for what John was for her. Like, I think for Lucy, a lot of the start of the story for her was finding the tools and the people to help her feel safe and fight back. And now she's in charge of people who she needs to be doing that for, and it makes her feel really weird. Like, she's still very much coming to terms with being on the other side of that equation. And Jasmine, I think, fits into this a lot as well, where like there's been this really interesting vibe of Jasmine kind of always tried to protect Lucy from the world, and it didn't really work. And now we're seeing Lucy kind of do the same thing with Jasmine, where it's like she and Jasmine have really not found much of a groove since Jasmine became aware, because Lucy can't figure out how to balance protecting her mom and keeping her safe versus including her in the violence of this world.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like, for all three of them, there's this aspect of learning how to be the people who can do the stuff that they needed at the start of the story. And that's so perfect for Pale, which is a story about community, because a good community member, as the community helps them get over their issues, it feels like the sensible thing to do is to then focus on helping other people with that.
Yeah. No, absolutely. I think Verona's relationship with Macaulay is a really perfect example of that, where she's running from her family. She needs a place to stay, and Verona's giving her that to get away from those pressures and be able to figure herself out and stuff. And
Yeah.
yeah, no, and with all the stuff that I was, reflecting on my own life and whatever earlier, that does make me think of that too. Of just like, who's the person that you needed when you were younger,
Yeah, exactly. And it's interesting. Verona specifically is interesting because I think for her, there's a bit of a chicken and egg situation with her becoming that person and her fully getting past the insecurities and stuff she had. It was almost like, in her case, there was a huge alignment between her being able to be that person for other people and her finally getting comfortable in her own skin, compared to
Mhm.
someone like Avery, who I think has now been doing the connection building for so long. It's almost sometimes difficult to draw the line from who she used to be to who she is now.
Mhm.
But that's one thing I've really liked about Pale is, the Kenneteers' journeys aren't just all identical or happening at different stages. Like, they're very unique, and
Mhm.
it's nice that, yeah, Avery has been doing this for a while and has been doing it so successfully. You forget that she's the person who used to need this, whereas Verona came onto the scene quite late, but it was in the process of becoming the person who other Veronas would need, that she became the person who could, that she became, somebody who didn't need that person anymore so much.
Mhm.
I mean, this is also Pale, so it's not like they're all just over it. Like, I think we're seeing, I'm touching on 20.1 spoilers here a little bit, because I
Mhm.
have read that,
How
but we
dare
see
you.
Avery a little bit dip back into some of the issues she had earlier in the story, where after being confronted by her vision of her, alt self in the challenge. And yeah, but yeah, I don't know. I love how this story isn't afraid to like have each of them have their own unique story, even as they all, you can kind of map them to things like how they're flipped, and now they're being the people that other versions of themselves need.
Mhm.
It doesn't mean that they're all going through the same journey at all.
Yeah, maybe that's actually a great example of like how we improve is part of that is
Mm,
helping other people. I've always felt the best about myself when like I was growing with someone else. Um And just for a different example, other than Verona, I think Avery and Nora is actually like, I mean,
Yeah.
Nora's obviously very, very different from early Avery, but like,
There was some
same sort of
overlap
thing. Yeah,
there.
the shyness and the trouble with people, and then here we have, yeah, Avery being what she wished her teacher was for her, right? Um, just
Yeah.
this very positive influence and validating and encouraging and but also challenging. And I think it's really, really nice. I love that relationship so much. I love Avery school scenes so much. I love the gossip, the drama. Oh,
They are very good, aren't
the
they?
party. Oh my god. That
Yeah.
little mic drop, I fucking loved it.
Putnam was a great addition
Oh
to that
yeah.
too. Like when you get introduced to someone and the introduction paragraph to them is Avery being like, "Yeah, if I found out she was like 1/8 Fae, I'd believe it." And I was just like, "Okay, so this person's going to be a fucking riot."
Yeah.
And she was. Uh,
Yeah.
yeah. Sorry, I guess to go back to Verona quickly a bit. I just remembered as well. We obviously saw her fetch come back to life in
Mm-hmm.
Oh yes.
Yeah, you
right at the
mentioned
end there.
other Veronas that need help.
Yes,
So
yeah, that was yeah. Like I think that's like with this idea in mind. That's why I'm going to be really interested to see what she does with the fetch because this is probably the most literal interpretation of my idea that now they're the people they needed. Because
mhm.
I don't think like Verona doesn't need the fetch for its original purpose anymore, right? Like she doesn't go to school.
Right.
She's just fully abandoned her dad from the looks of it, like as much as she can. Like I don't like the last time we saw the fetch before it came back, it was like, oh, I do want to go to school. Like, can you let me go to school? And Verona was like, we'll figure it out, and then put her on ice. And now she's back,
Mhm.
and so it's like, okay, we've got this Verona who does want to go to school but can't, which is at the same time very much not a Verona problem. That's not what we've seen Verona struggle with, unless you count the BHI, I guess. But yeah, it's going to be really interesting to see how this is very much a Verona with problems, but not, and
Mhm.
how she handles literally trying to help an old version of herself.
Yeah. Yeah, it'll be interesting how that goes. Doppelganger situations are fraught. As I don't know. I feel like as a theme in the other verse, I feel like that fits.
Yeah,
But yeah. But this is I don't feel that like her fetch is gonna be like a villain or something. I feel like it'll be a challenge, but not yeah.
yeah,
It doesn't feel right for there to be a nega Verona.
yeah. We've already got the Negateers. We
Yeah, yeah, fair enough.
oh,
Maybe the
fetch
fetch will
Verona.
join the Negateers.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's an interesting thought.
Yeah, I'm very, very interested to see where we're going with the Negateers. Obviously, I think they're going to be very, very big aspect of the next conflict arc.
yeah,
Um, and yeah, I want to see more about how that approach has been going because obviously, and how that approach differs from the Kenneteers. Because on the one hand, yeah, there was that aspect that was pretty important that like they can opt out, they can leave, they can quit if this isn't like right for them. In fact, they will get saved if they fail, which is huge. Like that's I don't know. They have they have a one extra life, right? They have a one up, and life doesn't normally give you that. And I'm interested to see how those metaphors get pulled out, and then yeah, how it's implied we should be addressing these things because also we saw that they're not as happy as the Kenneteers.
yeah,
Um, so yeah,
yeah.
I don't know.
They're quite explicitly Charles's answer to Miss and the Kenneteers.
Right.
So there's
Mhm.
there's a lot to play with there, as well as just yeah. I continue to come back to this idea. What's so funny about them is if the Kenneteers are going to try to talk to them now that they sort of openly can, it feels like the argument that the Kenneteers are going to naturally want to make to these other practitioners is, hey. You've been awoken by a bunch of evil others, and they're conspiring to use you. You
Mhm.
should not do that. And I just think that that's such a funny inversion on everything the BHI people were telling them at the start of
Right.
the story. Like, it's so funny that now the Kenneteers are going to be essentially making the argument that was made against them at the
Mhm.
start of the story. But now they're actually right. Like, now the Kenneteers
Right.
are right. It's like, no, you don't understand. Yours are actually the bad others, though. And they need to be stopped. Like, I can't wait to see how that
Probably.
goes.
I haven't actually. I don't know. I don't know enough about the the benefactors. I know one's a dropped call, but like I said, I mean, do we have any proof that the dropped call has done anything bad before? I think it's all show.
I mean, he hasn't been super friendly to Avery. Like, there was that one chapter where Avery was going out of her way to talk to everyone, including Samaniego, and she wouldn't answer his calls. And it's like,
Yeah.
like if Avery's screening your calls, you got to reevaluate some stuff, right? Like, she'll talk to anyone.
Yeah. No, she really will. It's great. Her talking to the Scarecrow Keeper was wonderful and very, very sweet. If only she got to take more of those fireflies. Tragic. She got a useless fruit out of it instead.
Snowdrop would be so offended that you called any fruit useless.
Well, hey, it's to make food not go bad. And it's not really that big of a deal to Snowdrop. I don't think so.
Yeah, actually, that's a good point.
But yeah, do you want to ask me your big questions?
Yeah, I think we're at that point now.
Yeah, it's that time.
I'll take the first one, which is which Kennet other would be your first choice for familiar?
You know, I've been looking at this question literally all day, and I did not even think about it for 2 seconds. Okay. Well, okay. Before all of the things that happened, I would love to be to choose Marisica as my familiar. I mean, yeah, she's a baddie, but she's also like a baddie, you know?
Yeah. We get Marisica and Liz, I think, are
really?
by far the two most common answers we get.
Interesting. Well, I love. Okay, so I'm trans. I fucking love shapeshifting. Okay, shapeshifting has always been that's the power I choose. Like getting to lose my mortal form, this meat body, and change it to something else. That is the ideal. Like.
And was that a fun revelation for you when you realized you were trans?
Yes,
oh,
actually.
That's why. I see.
Yeah, literally. Like, why did I think it was objectively the best power? Why is that always what I thought about? You know, like I had like a lot of, I don't know, fantasies in my day to day of just like, yeah, what if I could do that? What if I could just be something else? Although, unlike some of my peers, although there's many peers that also think the same as me. I did not think about changing to other humans like ever. It was always like just transcending the human form entirely, which I'm
to an animal form like an animorph. That's what I would think about.
Yes. No, I don't. No, I don't think about that. No, it's just a meat body, like just a blob, many limbs, swinging around in the jungle. That's the ideal.
In the latest series of Dimension 20, they're doing a Fae arc right now. Like it's a Regency like Pride and Prejudice thing, but they're all Fae and goblins. And one of the fairy queens who gets introduced right at the start of the first episode never takes any form except the wind in her castle.
Interesting.
And I was just like, "Fuck, that's cool." Like,
yeah, that is.
And so she's having to send her son, one of the player characters, to like do the actual adventure because to leave the castle would involve debasing herself by taking a physical form, and she won't do it. And I was like, "Oh god, that's awesome."
That's fascinating. Well, it's actually very interesting. I've been talking. I don't know if you knew this, but New York has a lot of trans people. It's kind of pretty cool, especially coming from Texas. But you know, I ask that question sometimes, and a lot of us want to do the shapeshifting, but I hear different answers. Some people want to change their form to like another human. Some are more like me, where they want to change all the time. Other people like just wish they could just change once to something that is beyond human. A good friend of mine recently, like they talked in depth about how they wish they could be a cloud, like that would be their ideal form. And I just, it's fascinating where these different motivations come in, because it's not just like, oh, I wish I was a cloud person. It's like, no, they want to be an actual cloud and that just be their existence, which is just really interesting.
That is fascinating, because I would think being a cloud would be too stressful because they never get to just like lie down and relax. You know, they're always up there moving and stuff. That seems like a lot of effort.
Interesting, but they're blown around by the wind, so I think they were more imagining just floating along and just being like that.
I want to be snuggled in my bed though. And I feel that doesn't feel like a cloud vibe to me.
Yeah, actually, so what are your ideal forms, Elliot and Ruben? You don't have to go in depth about it, but
if I was a shapeshifter, I don't think I would want to just pick one form. I would want to be It's just an anamorph. The ability to touch an animal and then be like, now I'm going to become this animal. I think that's how it works. I haven't read Animorphs in a while, but I think it's something like that.
Pretty much. Except it's like a horrific looking transformation. I reread actually the first book very recently. Yes, that is how it works.
Mine's easy, merman. I want a fishtail and I want to live underwater. Right.
Interesting.
That was literally my first instinct when you asked the question, so I'm going to assume that there's something to that.
Yeah, we'll see that there is some like, I feel like there's something that reveals something about you because it's like what you identify with, right? So like, what aspects of those things are important to you, you know? For me, whenever I imagine it, it's very much like a freedom of movement thing. Like I'm always when I'm imagining these things, I'm always like scaling buildings or something. Very if you ever played I think it's the Prey games or right?
Yes,
yeah, I never played them, but like the bits where you run up the buildings and stuff, that's what I'm picturing all the time.
I mean, did you tell us what your ideal form was?
Oh, just like a ever shifting, just creating limbs on the fly.
Limbs in the jungle.
Yes, that's right. Yeah.
The old Amy Dallin special wiggle.
I was thinking kind of more like Crawler, but without the acid.
I see.
Just a little less horrific, but not that much less horrific.
Just a different one of Vicky's nightmares. Yeah, that's cool.
Yes, exactly. Yes. And then occasionally picking something prettier, I think would be nice. I always picture myself with antlers whenever I do a pit crew that has antlers. I'm like, fuck yeah. I just think they're cute. No, I'm very much like a transcend the human form. Actually, in the next 2 years, I have vowed that I'm going to get my tongue split. I'm going to do it. It's going to happen. I'm going to have 2 tongues. They're going to slice it open with lasers by a doctor. And I'm going to have 2 tongues for the rest of until I don't want to. And it's going to be awesome. And I'm very excited.
Sometimes I feel like when I talk to some of the people in my life who aren't like affiliated with these podcasts or anything, it seems borderline scandalous that I got a tattoo. And then conversations like this really bring that shit down to earth.
Yeah, it's interesting. Well, that's also, it's like a choice that like really felt like the first time someone talked to me about seriously like they were going to get one. They were a bit older than me, and I don't know. I was like very much like, whoa, you can just like, you can do that. That seems like that's too much. But then I'm like, fuck it, why not? Right? Like, it's not even that expensive. It's like $2,000 to get it done like professionally by a doctor, like in the safest way possible. And that's like, it's not that. It means a pretty serious body mod. Like, anyway, I'm going off about tongue splitting. Y'all should get your tongue split. It's cool. Anyway, no, tattoos are not nearly as scandalous, but they are just.
This is what I keep trying to tell people. I'm like, because it's often people like my parents or my parents' age who think it's a big deal to get a tattoo, and you have to sort of explain to them. It's like, no, for younger millennials and Gen Z, this is basic bitch shit.
Yeah,
I got a tattoo on my upper arm. That's nothing. Like,
so Marissa?
Yes, that would be my
not blood goddess Marissa.
No.
I mean, but not as a familiar. Well, no, because I don't know. I don't think I would enjoy that power dynamic with Mariska in particular. I think that would not go well.
I don't think Marissa has proven herself as what's the word I want to use? Just like a caring person. Someone who you can trust to be altruistic. That's the word.
Yeah, it would very much be a thing of like pre transformation sequence of like what is the thing that Marissa wants, and then how can we do that together? Just so I trust that like I am fulfilling a goal of hers, and I don't have to worry about what other.
I think you would still have to worry.
I think you're underestimating Fairy.
I was listening to myself as I spoke, and I was just like, "That's not gonna work."
But the other question that we always ask our guests, Lex, is who is the best Kenneteer?
I remember in answering this, you are saying that you don't like the other two.
You're right.
Yeah,
Okay. Well, wait, so obviously the question is, what does best mean? What are you actually asking? You know?
Yep.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Appreciate it. That clears it right up. Well, okay. So it's still the same answer as it was last time, where I identify so strongly with Verona. And she's very much like she's my self-insert. She's very much like, I don't know. I just delight to hear about what she's doing and how she's coping with things. And yes, and then Avery, I love her chapters because they're just so fun and make me feel warm inside. And then Lucy's just a fucking badass, and the coolest plot stuff happens in her chapters, and she's just also very good. But yeah, no, I just identify with Verona the most. So I'm just gonna choose Verona. I'm picking myself here.
Yeah, I mean, as you said at the start of the episode, you gotta be able to do stuff like that.
Wait, do stuff like what?
Respect yourself. Call
Oh,
out your
yeah.
own goodness.
Yeah, a little bit. Yeah, give yourself those things sometimes. I don't know. I'm trying to also, if I could be a sexy sorceress, I would love to, but I'm would also have like a, I don't know, I want to be a cool esoteric bitch. So like that's my identity that I'm working toward. I'm collecting a bunch of weird books. You should see my little library. They're all just like titles that I thought were cool. I have like a little poetry book that I did not read and I do not like reading, but it's poems, dead and undead, and it's like the coolest little black book on my bookshelf. I just like aesthetics, I guess. I don't know.
So yeah, judging a book by its cover.
Oh hell yeah,
I can get behind it.
Well, I mean, why else do you buy a book? To read it? You can read it online. The only reason to have a physical copy of something is to show it off. That's the only, okay, not the only reason, obviously, but like,
well, to loan it to people, maybe.
Yeah, I think it's a very valid reason to just buy books for the aesthetic and then not read them. I don't know. Maybe you should, but like,
wasn't this? I remember this being a thing. I think it was in Arc 13 when Avery was making her first big deal with the Garricks, and she was getting them to send her like digital scans of their books, and Zed and Nicolette were like, no, you want the hard copies so that you like people will think you're cooler. And Avery, because they were talking to Avery, so Avery's just like, I don't give a fuck. Like,
yeah,
what are you
I think Verona
about?
would get it. Verona would get it.
100%. That's right up Verona's alley, as we're literally seeing in this arc.
Yes. Yeah, I can't wait for the Wandering Bookstore thing. Oh, it's such a cool. It's like, but yeah, okay. I think that's all my answer for that question anyway.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Cool.
Well, let's get into, I think, the other obligatory sort of section we have, which is discussing the arc title, like Crossed with Silver, which is sort of an idiom to do with paying for a service, or like paying in advance. Specifically, it sort of comes from, you would place silver coins on a fortune teller's hand, apparently, and then they tell you your fortune. It's often also associated with like bribes and stuff. So yeah, just sort of payment with various unscrupulous connotations is sort of the vibe I get from it.
Well, we have plenty going on with the market, right? And then yes, as you wrote down, offering Marcy as an offering to the Wild Hunt. Those are definitely the ones that I think of.
Yeah, and in fact, I remember when the arc first started, a lot of people drew the line between Silver and Fae, because we've heard a bunch of times in this story how Silver is good against all fairy except the Winter Court. Yeah. So obviously when Guillerme and then the rest of the Wild Hunt showed up in our Christmas-ish arc called Crossed with Silver, I don't think that was a shock to anyone.
Yeah.
I guess the other thing that we should do, Lex, is force you to predict what's going to happen at the end of this story.
Sorry, I have one more Crossed with Silver thingy.
Okay, yeah.
Does it count as like crossing or betraying Musser, what Derosha did at the end there? Can we count that?
Loosely, I don't know.
There's not really payment involved, is there? Yeah.
No, I was more focusing on just the crossing part.
The crossing.
Not quite a double cross, but
she did cross him. Yeah, and I bet Musser is quite cross about it as well.
If he's still alive. I mean, didn't they just dump him outside Kennet without his car and like
He'll be
Derosha
fine.
promising to destroy anyone who tries to help him get out of it? Like,
Yeah, he's got his familiars though, and his familiars are like loyal because he's terrifying.
true.
So, yeah.
I want, so we were talking about how Raquel's going to respond. Is Anthem still in the civility course? What's Anthem going to think about all this?
What did he do when all this is going down? I have no idea.
Because Anthem's also the one person who like sees Musser as a human. Like, so like in terms of the person who's going to have Musser's back for as close to a good reason as you can have it, Anthem's like the one person who will help him out, but also maybe in a good way if he's been reformed by the civility court. That'd be I Anyway, sorry.
No, why would no? Don't say sorry. It's your podcast. This is what you do. I had another Cross with Silver thing. We didn't really talk about the interlude much, but I found him to be very, very interesting as well.
Yes.
Ryan. Yeah, I mean, he also crossed several people as well,
including Fortune itself.
Yeah, but then he got out of it, which I find interesting. Basically, sort of like declaring bankruptcy by becoming the bank.
He became crossed with gold.
He did. Okay, that's all I got.
Yeah, no, you're right. It's like it's like if you had someone who was massively in debt and they did something like become the president of the United States to sort of have all the debtors back off for 4 years or so. Like something like that.
Something like that.
Hypothetically.
Yeah. So bold and specific prediction about the future?
Yes.
Yeah, hit us with it.
Fuck. Yeah, it's very much. Well, I mean, I have some predictions, but they're because I read the next 3 chapters, so I'm not gonna say them. That's a little bit of cheating. Basically, I'm trying to think of what are the dangling threads that are left. Obviously, there is stuff with the Garricks, and of course, the Kenneteers and Charles in general taking down Marisica. Well, they're going to take down Marisica. I know that. Something's going to go on with the lighthouse again.
do you think all the conspirators are going to end up like fully taken down by the end of the story?
No.
Well, in either case, there's nothing left to take down.
Sure.
God damn. Yeah, I think the two of them, Liz and Edith, might be able to get into a place where they might be okay, or like have a future that might be okay. But yeah, Charles, I don't know. I don't know if he's not gonna stay in power, but I don't know if he's gonna die or not. Marisica, I really don't know about her. I feel like, I don't know, she's being a kind of chill blood goddess right now. So like, I don't know. Does she have to be taken down? Do we gotta?
I think she has a pretty demonstrated pattern of not really giving a shit about anyone but herself, to the point where I don't know that we can ethically leave her in such a powerful position, but I don't know.
Yeah, but it's like, I don't know. She's not doing anything right now. Why bother?
Yeah, that is what it would come down to an extent.
Also,
like,
she has changed a lot, literally.
Well,
so
that's an interesting argument.
Yeah, I mean, yeah.
Said change came at the cost of other people's lives, so I don't know how much you want to reward the behavior of doing that.
I'm just saying, if you were like, Marisica is a bad fairy, she'd probably be like, Forsworn, fucking Gaten said, I'm not a fairy anymore, you lose. I'm no longer conniving.
She's just a bad person. Is like what I describe her as at this point. Like, I don't care what label we want to chuck on her. The label bad, I think, applies regardless of what next word you use.
Well, like, what does she want to do? Like, she's succeeded, she got what she wanted. She is now something different, no longer Fae. She's escaped that, and now she's super powerful. So what next? I would imagine maybe, I don't know, taking revenge against the Fae court, maybe, that like did this to her. But like, oh, so that's, I don't know. I feel like she'd be like, nah, I don't give a shit about Fairy anymore.
Yeah, that's going to be the really interesting thing to see. Like, because even in her interlude, all those arcs and arcs ago, it didn't really seem like she had a sense of a final goal beyond "Don't be Marcy" anymore. Like the parallels to Verona at the start of the story were very explicit. It was like she just knew she didn't want to be what she is, and it's like,
what then?
You know, at this stage, what does her motivation look like now? Is it still just get away from any of the wild hunts, or what is she thinking? That's going to be very interesting to find out as the Kenneteers are explicitly looking for her weaknesses.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, yeah. So I guess that's pretty much it. We'll be doing a short back to pacts, I think, after this. Although I think we're about to lose Ruben, unfortunately.
Yes, but don't worry, folks, because there's more to come after the outro. But before then, in case there are those of us who haven't read Pact and can't stick around like me, we should first say thanks for joining us, Lex, for this episode.
Of course, yeah. And if you liked me speaking, you can check me out on all the podcasts I'm currently hosting.
Yep. And you can find those podcasts at justmedia.com.
Yeah, no, for real though. Check out some of the older podcasts I've done. I with a college friend, covered Worm and Decomposing Worm. There was a writing podcast I went on for a while called Do the Right Thing. And then there's a podcast on BoJack Horseman called The View from Halfway Down, which I'm also taking a step back from, and it's on hiatus until Sebastian finds another co-host. But yeah, there's some cool content out there, I think.
Yeah, definitely second The View from Halfway Down. That was very fun to listen to.
Thank you. I very much enjoyed recording those episodes.
If you want to support the great shows that the Duff Media Network puts out, you can go to patreon.com/duffmedia.
Yes, and don't forget to stop by Wildbow's Patreon, patreon.com/Wildbow. We wouldn't have been here if he wasn't writing this. You must know that by now.
Pretty true. Yep. All right, well, those of us who haven't read Pact are going to head off, and the rest of you fine folks, can go back to Pact.
Thank you.
Right, cool.
You should add like a little time travel noise. Yeah.
All right, cool. Well, yeah. So back to Pact. So I'll have probably edited out or bleeped the little mention that this got
Sure.
earlier on. But yeah, obviously it has been quite a long time since we talked about Johannes and his domain, which I assumed is what you were referencing.
Yes.
Yeah, because I remember talking about that early in the story and how it compared to Kennet. But there's obviously, because you could argue Johannes's domain almost conceptually was halfway between Charles and like Mrs. ideas of what Kennet can be. I think.
What do you, by Mrs. idea of what Kennet could be? What do you mean?
The way Miss was sort of targeting, I guess, not overhauling the status quo, but just trying to sort of rebuild it in a healthier way, like things like the Kenneteers being like community sheriffs who are inherently tied to the community and support them, but like it was essentially other rights more than like Charles, I think, doesn't really give as much of a shit about other versus human rights. He just wants certain people to be able to rise up if they suffer enough or whatever.
Well, it's also about being able to challenge the system in general. Like, I think what is pretty key about Kennet Below is that there's not really like it's anarchy, right? Not I don't know. I feel like a lot of anarchists would be like, that's not what we were talking about, but sure. But in the sense of if a system is bad, it can be challenged, right? If one of the local lords, like gang lords or whatever, and Kennet Below is not good, someone can take them out and take their place and be a better ruler. Or you can just leave, ideally.
Yeah, so I guess with Miss, I more got the vibe she wanted to tweak things so certain groups weren't being oppressed. Like for Miss, it was about, okay, how can we make it so like others who are being oppressed are no longer that is happening to them. Whereas Charles is much more, like part of his is very overtly he's sort of reactionarily being like, oh, you want to go fucking old school seal? Like, I'll take it old school. And Johannes was sort of in the middle of those two ideas where it was hearkening back to the old days where others had freedom. So it was like the other rights angle and also the sort of seal side of Charles's stuff.
Mhm.
It was kind of some bits of both of these two
Yeah.
philosophies, I guess.
Yeah, I find it interesting. Yeah, it's interesting. How should we view um what are they called? The the half people. what roses?
Oh, the
Yeah, it's
vestiges.
vestige. Yeah, I kept thinking vessel, and it was taking up that space for that word in my head. Anyway, yeah, the vestiges. Um, because there's a couple ways I would view that. One as just like maybe a metaphor on like sort of just taxing everyone basically to
Yeah.
feed. But then that gets really confusing because like what are others in this metaphor then? And not that these things have to be one on one, but like what's the vibe, right? Another one though is like it's sort of creating a new underclass. So below humans would be the vestiges, who are basically alive even if they don't know
Yeah.
that they're not, sort of. Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like the tax metaphor breaks down once we learn that the vestiges have their own level of consciousness and like
Yeah.
memory.
Yeah.
And it turns more into like those who ran from Omelas sort of vibes of like
Mhm.
uh, an equal distribution, but still this idea of okay, what we're going to do is take like 5% of the population, and they're going to have a shit time. But it's so everyone else can kind of be fine, and that way we're not like or these others can be thriving or whatever.
Right.
Is what it feels closer to me.
Mhm.
Once we learn the vestiges are their own people.
Yeah. Yeah. Goddamn, what it's literally a horror world. Jeez. Um, yeah, I do wonder how those others were doing with the other others in the area. Like, were they all just like chilling out? Were they all buds? Or were they like fighting over stuff too? Because like, you know, just they're people and people fight, right? I want to see a
It's
fight between a dragon and a genie. That's what I'm talking about.
yeah, it seemed like there were rules to some degree to stop that, but I imagine there were also certain groups that are like, no, 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 I'm coming here to get rowdy. Like, I can
Hmm.
imagine like an ogre or something coming in. And
Hmm.
it's like, no, you don't understand. I want to wrestle with some goblins or some other ogres or
Hmm.
something. Like,
Right.
that's part of my whole jam.
Hmm.
Um, so yeah, I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I wonder what he would think if he were to wander into this area. Um, and vice versa. I was very much thinking of Rook in particular, actually. I mean, that's what I was saying at the time. But yeah, what
Yeah.
would Rook think of this ideal of preying on vestiges? Which should be like, yeah, this is fucking dope. This is exactly what I was talking about. This is another one of those like refuges that we've been wanting. But at the same time, yeah, I don't know. Maybe she would recognize that the vestiges are suffering and are slightly other. Maybe enough for her to empathize.
Yeah. Oh, I don't know that I trust Rook that much in terms of empathy. I honestly I feel like her biggest problem with it all might be that it's a practitioner sitting on top.
Yeah, fair enough.
Um, but yeah, you're right. I could see Rook actually getting quite on board with the idea of ripping these vestiges out because there was that one flashback that Verona had to Rook's stuff where Rook let those children like starve and turn other to turn them
Hmm.
to her side, which really I think spoke to the heartlessness for how she treated like innocents and humans. So I could
Hmm.
see her actually, like getting on board with the sort of stuff Johannes was doing is definitely better than the status quo, at least.
Hmm.
Which
Yeah,
is,
no, that stuff is really interesting because it's like, I don't know, how much should you value innocence, especially in like
yeah,
a very difficult scenario like that? I mean, like if your food is limited, I can understand why you would turn some people into things that don't need food. Um, but I don't know how to quantify that kind of suffering. I don't know how to compare it to other things. Um,
yeah. I think there is honestly an argument to be made that innocence is a bad thing. I think
mhm.
like, and I
It's
think
it's
Miss.
ignorance too.
Yeah, exactly. Like it's people specifically being put in a position where they don't have to care about others and the way that they're treated, which since like a lot of the central metaphor around others tends to be disenfranchised groups, it's then hard not to read innocence as something that's about ignorance and not having to worry about other people's problems.
Mhm.
Um So I don't know. Like Miss has said that she doesn't really begrudge the innocents themselves, but has a bit of a problem with the system. And I feel like that's sort of where I would be at too. Where it's like
Mhm.
I'm not really going to hold it against a specific innocent that they are innocent. That's the world they were raised in, I guess. But
Mhm.
like it seems like a bit of a problem that is something people can do.
Right. Yeah. Sort of related is, humans doing bad things is what creates bad others, right?
Yeah.
It's just the fact that there's violent deaths is what creates revenants and other boogeymen sometimes. Um, yeah, it's interesting. Obviously, there's always going to be a bit of violence in the world, but it is partially our responsibility to like the thing that I was wanting to get to was how all these like violent others, I mean, they do have a right to live, right? As much as
Yeah.
any consciousness does, but of course they don't have a right to hurt others. And so the key there is just to try and not have new violent others be made as much as other ones.
Yeah, which is the Carmine's job. So
Yeah. He kind of did a bad one there. Um, yeah. Also, completely unrelated. Maybe this should be back to back. I don't know, but this reminds me a lot of it struck me like the second or third season of The Last Airbender of Korra, not The Last Airbender, of Korra, Legend of Korra, Avatar Legend of Korra, the second series after Avatar The Last Airbender,
yeah.
when the big, I don't know, spoilery thing happens that changes the world,
Mhm.
um
Mhm.
I don't know, maybe I
Yeah.
should go look at that and see what comparisons I can make, but that's a whole different thing. I don't have anything
Yeah.
in my mind yet.
No, I think the other thing I'd want to compare this to, what you just mentioned with the whole like others are kind of humans' responsibility, like consciously or not, aware or not, humans are kind of responsible for the energy they're putting out into the world, which is
Mhm.
making and transforming others.
Mhm.
And this comes back to so much of what the Page of Suns was talking about with Avery to me. Like, I think that is what he was hinting at, and where Avery kind of fell apart for him is when she said that humans were the centerpiece. So it made sense that they were a bit self centered. And I think she was like close, but it was like, yeah, the answer was no, like humans are kind of the center of all this, which means the rest of it is your responsibility.
Mm.
Like that was
Mhm.
my takeaway from their conversation. And so I think
Yeah,
like that
shit. Yeah, no,
ties into it a lot here.
that's great. I gotta reread that. That is something. Yeah, okay. No, that's really good. That is how I think of animals. Is just that like, yeah, we are them, but we're like the most powerful version of them, and so yeah, I
Mm.
think we do have responsibility to the rest of the life on our planet and stuff like that. Um,
Yeah, exactly.
even beyond just like climate stuff, just in the sense of like the ideal version of humanity is one that is custodians and guardians and um just like, yeah, good shepherds and stuff for the rest of life on earth, and that includes the things that as part of their existence kill other things, and then having to deal with that and grapple with that and find solutions anyway. So that's a really good connection. Thank you for bringing it up.
Yeah. So TLDR, Johannes, what are we thinking?
Um, yeah.
Good idea, bad idea.
Slightly better than all of Charlie's others slaughtering people, because those were whole people. And his is just little pieces of people getting slaughtered and tortured horrifically. But yeah, I don't think it's so good of a long-term solution either, especially in
No.
comparison to something like Kennet.
I do think it's really funny because I definitely remember when I was reading Pact, like hearing about Johannes's domain and kind of thinking, oh, this does seem like a good idea.
Hmm.
And part of that was because I think I did come out of Pact with, or at least definitely for most of Pact, I was not thinking of others as people as much as like,
Hmm.
you should. Um, but also I think Johannes is one of the few people, like for me, so much of Pact was centered around this message of we need to change the system and we need to fight. And it was more about the idea that you shouldn't let the system beat you down. You should keep fighting. But Pact grappled a lot less with the question of, okay, but if we're fighting, what are we aiming for? Like
Hmm.
Pact was just don't give up. but
Yeah.
there wasn't like Rose Senior and her whole plan around it was just about flipping the table. It wasn't about actually building something specific. So like Johannes was kind of the one person in Pact who was presenting like a somewhat cohesive vision for the future.
Right.
Like he's sort of the one person who was saying, this is the change I'm actually going for, like, as opposed to just Blake running around being like, it's bad and we just need to tear it down.
Right.
Whereas Pale, right from the get-go, has quite centrally been about figuring out what sort of change we want to do and how can we fight better.
Hmm.
And so, of course, Pale has sort of presented us with better options that make Johannes look not as good in hindsight, because we've been forced to think a lot more about what we're actually trying to do.
Well, yeah, it's really it's really interesting to think about the vestiges and how alive they are and how much suffering they experience. And related to that, I think another really interesting other to think about is echoes, where like
Mm.
some of them are literally they are suffering, you know? Actually, a lot of
Yep.
them are just they are suffering. So it's like why even let it continue existing? But also like you are killing it, right?
Yep.
So I do not know. I mean, maybe there's a little bit of a difference with like I'm thinking of when we saw the vestiges and we saw inside of them and they're like filled with like spirit rats and stuff, right? I was just like, okay, well, if you reduce it to its component parts, is that the same thing as
Yeah.
killing it?
You can really ship of Theseus the concept of life in the Otherverse.
Yeah, yeah. Well, it makes me think of like, you know, I think all life is valuable, but I do draw a line somewhere between
Yeah.
rats and like tiny bugs and dust mites. Somewhere in that line, somewhere's a line of like I don't give a shit anymore. Because I just can't. Like I cannot think about the
Yeah.
suffering of bacteria, okay? Um even
Well,
though
yeah, I
yeah,
mean,
they live and
especially
die.
when especially when you start to get a single cell like that, it's like they don't really have a nervous system. Like there is no consciousness there. Like,
Mm,
as much as I will claim that in the other verse, it's this real spectrum. I think that's true in uh, like real life too. Like, at what point
mm,
does something that doesn't have a central nervous system? At what point do you still decide that that has like feelings and that those feelings matter?
yeah. Like I'm a bug squasher. I don't squash all of them. Like uh, I try to let spiders live and stuff like that. Especially if it's I don't kill bugs because it's good for the environment to not do that. But I do not think twice about killing a fly or a mosquito or whatever. I do try to kill them as instantly as possible. So there is like
Yeah,
a little bit of like, okay, I don't want it to suffer, but I don't care about it being alive or not. Which is yeah, it's interesting to have that line. And then by the time you get to mice, I'm like, I really do not want to kill a mouse. Oh god.
yeah. Well, it's like, now that I live with cats who are full on psychopaths,
Torturous, yeah.
yeah, there have been a number of times where I've walked in and we have a lot of penny lizards at our place,
Hmm.
little like skinky things. And so I will come in and find one whose tail has been removed, and the cat is like poking it along the ground as this thing with like no tail and three legs is like
Ugh,
scampering and being toyed with. And it's just like, I
Jesus.
come in, it's just, like just instantly I try to kill that thing as quickly as I can. It's
Yeah,
like,
man.
fucking cats.
That's horrible. Yeah, I had we got mice and I got like rail traps that kill like, yeah, instantaneously or whatever.
Yeah.
But the landlord came in and just handed me a big stack of glue traps. And I was like, fucking no, I'm not gonna
Oh,
fucking use these. Because if they don't kill themselves by thrashing against it or starving to death, then you gotta kill it yourself. Like, that's
mm.
horrible. Oh God.
Yeah, it's crazy. My sister is a vet, and it's crazy hearing stories about how only 30, 40 years ago, how little disregard was given for like just to so many animals with regards to like
Hmm.
the concept of whether or not they suffer and that sort
Hmm.
of thing. Like,
Well, if we're gonna draw a metaphor, I feel like fucking like factory farms are a good example to point at for Johannes'
yeah,
domain, in the sense of like here are the things that we view as less than human, and they are all suffering for our consumption. Um, but that's what we need to survive. But also, we could do something not as bad, probably.
yeah, yeah, yeah. I see that comparison for sure.
Mhm. Okay, that seems like enough back to packy things, I suppose.
Yeah. Cool. Well, it's been a long time and we still don't really have an outro for this part. So bye, everyone.
It was bye. Thank you.